that you are not going to hear so much about in the corporate media is how we got to here. How is it that we have this man as our president? And it turns out, if you do a deep dive into this, if you look at the reporting, the research and the reporting that's been done on Robert and Rebecca Mercer's company, Cambridge Analytica, and the incredibly good work that they did on behalf of the Trump campaign, slicing, dicing, and parsing information, and we'll find out to what extent that they were using that information for micro-targeting individual consumers at the level typically of Facebook, among other things. But I think to some extent this is going to come out in the Mueller investigations. And whether and who it was, who was buying these Facebook ads, and whether the Russian troll farms were being paid for by the Russian government or by Paul Manafort and all that other stuff. I mean, these are things, inquiring minds want to know. But the bottom line is, and it's not just, by the way, Trump. It's like, how did we get George W. Bush and pretty much everything else? How did we get Ronald Reagan? And I would say it all goes back to 1976 in the U.S. Supreme Court. In 73, after Nixon resigned, Congress passed a whole series of laws to get money out of politics. I mean, really good legislation. You can't give over a certain amount. I think it was $1,600 to an individual politician. You can't give over a certain amount. I think it was $4,000 or $5,000 to a political party. There were all these very specific limits on money in politics. And a bunch of billionaires said, no, we want to be able to own politicians. And they took it to the Supreme Court. The case was Buckley versus Vallejo in 1976. And the Supreme Court, in a 5-4 decision, said, and Lewis Powell wrote the decision, said, actually, it might not have been 5-4. I'd have to go back and look at that. But the Supreme Court said, sure enough, giving money to politicians or giving money to influence elections is considered constitutionally protected First Amendment free speech. That money is speech, right? I've never seen a dollar bill talk, but apparently in the world of Lewis Powell and William Rehnquist, it does. And had it not been for that Supreme Court decision, Robert and Rebecca Mercer would not have been able to go, the billionaires would not have been able to go all in on Trump. And he would have faded early on. All the other Republican candidates wouldn't have had their own individual special interest billionaires. You wouldn't have had the Democratic Party being corrupted by billionaires in the banking and pharmaceutical industries. You wouldn't have had the Republican Party being corrupted by billionaires in the fossil fuel and chemical and defense industries. None of this would have happened, or it wouldn't have happened with such severity if the Supreme Court had not discovered in the Constitution that the founders wanted rich people to be able to control our political system. We have just a couple thousand people in the United States who fund more than half of all the political campaigns in this country. There's something fundamentally wrong with that. That's called oligarchy, as Jimmy Carter pointed out in this program. And then once the oligarchy gets their oligarch, in this case Donald Trump, they're going to do everything they can to defend him and keep him in place unless he's no longer useful to the oligarchy. Throughout last year, I kept saying the Republicans are going to throw Donald Trump under the bus as soon as they get their tax breaks. Because the oligarchs who own the Republican Party are interested in only one thing: money. Whether it's the money that they're going to make by having Ryan Zinke destroy Bears Ears so that they can mine uranium there, or whether it's the money that they're going to make by having Donald Trump and Congress say it's fine to drill in Anwar and destroy the environment up there, or whether it's the money that Georgia Pacific will make if their pollution standards are loosened, or if it's the money that coal-fired power plants will make, if those standards are loosened. If it's The coal miners this year, the last year, in 2016, the highest number of deaths in coal miners in years. We're dialing back safety requirements in our mines. Now, it doesn't mean that we're hiring more miners. It doesn't mean the miners are being paid more. But Donald Trump did away with those job-killing regulations, right? And put a mine owner in charge of the mining safety place. Or a mining industry shill. So it shouldn't surprise us when the people who are putting our politicians in office, essentially, by buying the elections, don't give a damn about governance. They don't care about whether Social Security works. They don't care about Medicare or Medicaid working. They don't care about international relations as long as they can make their money. It's all about the money. So the question was, you know, if Trump could bring along the base to harass Congress to say, yes, do those tax cuts, if Trump could do that, then they would leave him in power. But now that he's done that, and he's starting to say and do things that might make it less profitable for the oligarchs. In fact, you know, largely what has happened is, you know, Toto has pulled back the curtain, right? We're seeing the great and powerful Oz as, you know, this kind of short, elderly guy who's just, you know, I am the great and powerful Oz. No, you're not. Now we're seeing that Donald Trump is unwilling to let the White House staff touch his toothbrush because he's afraid they're going to poison him. He's unhappy about eating food in the White House because he's afraid somebody's going to poison him. That's why he eats McDonald's and Kentucky Fried Chicken. I mean, do you get this? There's something deeply, deeply wrong here. And I still haven't gone through the, you know, the 11 explosive claims from the new book, but you probably heard them all in the media. But, you know, we will touch upon them. But what do we do about this? I think that frankly, I think impeachment is going to be very, very, very difficult. But the 25th Amendment, I think there's a real possibility there. What do you think?